Okay po, it's 3:32, so pwede na po siguro tayong mag-start. Magandang hapon po ulit sa inyong lahat, and thank you po for spending your afternoon with us. Welcome po to the second to the last remote and interactive learning conversation before the SEM opens. This is Resisting the Rubric, the Arts and Humanities in Remote Learning. Ngayon pa lang po, nagpapasalamat na ako kay Dr. Judy for suggesting that title. Hello po sa Team YouTube na nagsistream sa atin ngayon live. At syempre, hello din po dito sa Team Zoom. We'd love to hear from you po. So please feel free to share your thoughts sa ating chat box. Okay po? Kung maalala niyo po, noong June 30, yung Arts and Humanities cluster po, yung pinakauna nating audience dun sa ating remote learning webinar. So, it is but fitting na tayo po uli yung magkakasama as we wind down our webinar series. This conversation po has been a long time coming, kaya sobra po akong excited that we are all finally here. At ito po talaga nabanggit ko nga po sa ating panelists that this was really born out of the question na how can we further support the arts and humanities faculty during this time? So ngayong hapon po, it's part temperature check. Kamusta na po kaya yung ating mga faculty sa kanilang mga paghahanda, part intellectual exercise, and part how to din po siya. Meron po tayong tatlong experts for this discussion at dahil marami po tayong kailangan i-cover, hindi ko na po patatagalin pa. Pero bago po yung kanilang presentation, help me welcome po muna yung ating tatlong panelists. Mag-hello po sila sa atin ngayon. So unahin ko na po ang program head ng the Philippine Performance Archive at isa rin pong professor from the Department of English and Comparative Literature, the College of Arts and Letters dito sa UP Diliman, si Professor Judy Celine Ick. Hi, Prof. Judy.
Hello.
Thank you po. Okay. Kasama rin po natin ang Director ng Center for Ethnomusicology at ang kasalukuyang Dean ng College of Music, si Dean LaVerne de la Peña. Hi, Dean. Good afternoon.
Hello. Hi. Magandang hapon sa inyong lahat.
Okay po. And finally, kasama rin po natin ng kasalukuyang College Secretary at Assistant Professor mula sa Faculty of Information and Communication Studies ng UP Open University, si Prof. Joyce May Manalo. Hi, Prof.
Hello,
Joyce.
good afternoon po.
Yan. Tapos, nagpapasalamat din tayo kasi pinaunlakan tayo ni Assistant Vice President Evangeline Amor, so she will be giving a brief response po doon sa magiging discussion natin. Okay po? So, again, kung meron po kayong questions and meron kayong comments, so please feel free po to use the chat box and we'll do our best to read them on air. Okay po? Sige. So, first off, subukan po nating pag-usapan muna, how do we keep the ethos of the arts and humanities alive during this time, and especially in the context of remote learning? So para tulungan po tayo na masagot yung tanong na yan, i-welcome po natin ulit si Dr. Judy Celine Ick. Hi, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Ton. I guess you can share my slides now.
Okay po. Here we go.
There we go. Yeah, my talk today is called The Readiness is All. I will explain what that means later. Anyway, next slide, please. Okay. The topic assigned to me today was keeping the ethos of the humanities alive in the remote environment. This is the question that Ton brought to me when he invited me to speak here. And it was kind of an interesting question, and the way it was put, because it sort of implies the threat of death. Why is there a need to keep the ethos alive? Parang death threat yung remote learning to arts and humanities. Maybe it's not that dramatic, but that possibility of death is keeping alive is not literal. At least it speaks of some kind of disjunction, that there must be necessary adjustments. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay. And that those adjustments have to come from, incommensurable paradigms. Okay? To begin to answer that question, I pondered on the validity of why it must be asked in the first place. And here are three ways I've come to think about the issue. One, it is true that the arts and humanities, we tend to focus on developing critical and creative thinking in our students. We do not teach heavily information-driven content. Second, in the arts and humanities, we rely a great deal on liveness, on presence. We are great improvisers, adjusting to the needs of the moment. nurturing a Socratic method of discovery in our classrooms, responding to a student's questions as they come, and raising even more questions about their responses. In arts and humanities, we teach our students not to simply answer questions, but also how to raise them. So teaching online for us is not as simple or as straightforward as watching a TED Ed video and taking the Quizlet. Okay? Third way I've come to think about it, and this is not me, this comes from Lev Manovich. He's a theorist of new media. And he describes it very aptly. He says there are two ways of meaning making in the world, okay? The database and the narrative. We live in a world, and especially so in the case of the digital world, ruled by the logic of the database. Data, information to be gathered, organized, and stored and pulled out as needed. What happens to artists and the arts in this world when artists are ruled by the logic not of the database, but of the narrative? For us, the points of connection between pieces of information is not an organizing principle or a taxonomy, but a story. We are storytellers, and connections between points in a story are far more complex than can be contained in any table or, heaven help us, bullet points. I don't know about you, but for example, in my experience, every time I encounter a table or a matrix that I'm supposed to fill out in all these forms from admin, my brain freezes and I have to reboot because this is not the way I process information. So anyway, in the humanities, okay, we aim to develop students who think, okay, and are capable of thinking. And here's the key word, not just thinking, but imagining a world outside that box, outside that rubric, outside that course guide. Okay? Where is the room for the imagination in a rubric, in a course pack, in a course guide? In a predetermined classroom that can just be an amalgamation of topics, links, and assessments. Where is the human in that? Where is the art? Next slide, please. And then there is the ominous language of this shift emanating from everywhere. Okay? First thing we were told was we had to gear up for remote learning. What a mechanistic turn of phrase, right? And that word choice speaks volumes. The language of the task at hand also gives rise to a range of averse reactions from those of us in the arts. Measurable. Oh my God, bagsak nga ako sa math kaya ako English major, then you're asking me to measure. Diba? We often trade in the immeasurable, the ineffable. This is what we do. Okay? What cannot be quantified. Sometimes even things that go beyond the logic of the word, and that requires other languages like dance, like theater, like visual arts, like music. So this measurable is kind of scary. Okay? Outcomes, my God, who can tell? Don't tell creative writers to imagine outcomes because they will give you a million possible outcomes. Ms. Ramos never put it in her objectives or outcomes in her courses that Judy Celine Ick will one day tread the path of Shakespeare. It's the most significant outcome of that course ever, but it was never, in a lesson plan or, a syllabus. And then, of course, there's the word rubric, which I contributed to the title of this talk because the rubric is just too much database. Our assessments sometimes fall between those categories. So yeah, I guess the question had to be asked. Okay, next slide, please. And I will begin to frame my answers to those questions, not even real answers, but more like gestures towards answers, by talking about what's possible in this brave new world that we've entered, and also talk about what's impossible unless. Okay? Because, theory is one thing, application is quite the other. Memos are one thing, realities on the ground quite another. Next slide, please. Okay, what's possible first? Let's be positive. What digital learning affords us is, of course, connection to the vast world out there of knowledge. Okay? It offers us a plethora of learning materials. The digital humanities is thriving, and it is a well from which we can dig deep. In taking the class to the digital platform, we situate ourselves within a larger community of inquiry or discourse community, from which we can draw and also contribute. So I'm sure you've all seen, all the resources out there. All of us have, virtual museum tours in our virtual theater tours in our syllabi now and things like that. Also educational technologies, right? Although I saw the memo this morning and I saw that we were getting virtual laboratories and all these technologies for teaching the sciences. I didn't see performance databases for the arts, so maybe that's in the pipeline, who knows. But anyway, there are free apps. We were looking in the English department at collaborative reading apps like Hypotheses, like Perusal, or even our learning management systems, whether it's Ooble or Google Classroom. They have discussion board features that take the place of class discussion. So many things are possible with the technologies. And the online platform also enriches sharing. In the classroom, you can just share our ideas, but here you can share links. You can quickly send links to your class and classmates, so to images, videos, performances, etc., that can only enrich and enhance and expand discussion. What I want to talk about, just as a brief example, is an example from my own experience with digital pedagogy in a very plain, very old-fashioned technology, which is blogging. Okay, can I have the next slide, please? Okay. What you're looking at, this is the blog site Transmedial Shakespeare. This is a public blog that emanates from a class that I've taught since 2010. When I first taught the class in 2010, it was just really a class about different afterlives of Shakespeare in all kinds of forms and all kinds of media. And I thought that because we were talking about media in the class, I decided that their class requirements would be posted in a blog. I was just being wala lang facetious at the time, okay? But then something happened, because this public blog that, just showcases the work of UP students taking this course, not even every semester, has had over 500,000 views in its lifetime, okay? Now, that's by no means viral, but I don't think any of us can claim to any of our academic productions being viewed 500,000 times, okay? But my students' work, because it is in a public blog, has been, okay? Next slide. Next slide, please. All right, this is typical. This is a photo gallery. This is a student who just put together, I think her topic was how Vogue magazine appropriated images of Ophelia. So she looked in different Vogue magazines from all around the world that had sort of the dead wet girl as an aesthetic, and she put it together in the gallery. Next slide, please. Look where it turns up. This is the most recent example. This is a book, Google Books. There's a book 2020 came out of Routledge on Ophelia in Spain and images of women, etc. And look at the bibliography. There's my student. Okay? And she's not the only one, and she's certainly not the first. I've seen my students' work in bibliographies and citations in academic journals in different languages. I've seen it in books in different languages as well. I've seen the website linked to important sort of Shakespearean websites around the world. I've seen, I've seen the material in open educational resources, syllabi of universities around the world. And it's, to me, sort of, I'm telling you this to prove a point, okay? And that is, and next slide, please. Okay, and that is what's possible, okay? Because what working online affords us is the possibility, or the opportunity to create digital artifacts and to have the World Wide Web as your playground. My God, if you're a creative mind, there's just so much you can do with so much that's available. And more than that, I want to show you too, I gave that example to show you too, that online education opens up for us, not just in terms of who can come into our classrooms, because if you remember that first OVPAA memo was on how to invite world experts and this and that, but all right, fine. But I'm also showing you that in creating digital artifacts, we can contribute, okay? It opens up opportunities for students to contribute. They become active contributors rather than passive consumers. And that's sort of what's possible, okay? Next slide, please. Of course, all of those are only possible under certain conditions. And until those conditions are met, let me talk about some of the challenges, the execution. Next slide, please. Okay, one of our biggest difficulties has been the confusion of categories, designing and preparing for online versus remote. Okay? Because remote learning and online learning are not always the same thing. Okay? And the confusion of categories burdens us as teachers. The slash that I see sometimes bothers me, a slash remote online. Because materials are not always translatable in the shift of modality. A video transcript is not the same as the video. Okay? So that you have to think of alternative readings covering the topic for the student who has no tech. Furthermore, remote learning students, those with no connection or access at all, are disconnected from the class interaction and discussion, which is the lifeblood of humanities courses. Okay? So the materials and activities prepared for them have to be more intense or somehow different from what is prepared for those who can't connect. It's very often in preparing course facts, we found ourselves planning not for one class, but two, for students with connections and those without. So effectively, we were doing double prep. The difference is not appreciated or talked about because it has devolved into a discussion of logistics, flash drives and couriers. As an example, let me talk about the preparation for English 13, which is the big GE course from my department, which a committee of at least 12 professors have been working on for over 2 months. Anyway, that course is out. People have enlisted. And we found out from the survey of the students that there are 47 students with no tech spread out across 36 sections taught by 25 faculty members. Now, cognizant of the differences of course design between online and remote, the department requested a resectioning of no-tech students to create 3 sections for no-tech students and make planning more efficient for 3 teachers who have the problem of designing the course specifically for the no-tech students, and make it the concern of those 3 instead of spreading out the problem across all 25. The request was denied. I don't know why. And that's what we need, a support system. In other countries, in other universities, the shift to online takes place over time with the support of an office of learning designers to help you create your course guide, with the support of a copyright office, to get you copyright permissions for the things on your course guide. But here, of course, kanya-kanyang kayod. Okay? Copyright is a singular concern for us, especially for people who teach Philippine Lit. No access to the web, there's no access to the materials on the web, and we don't want to bootleg our own writers and our own friends, who are artists in the Philippines. And it's a real problem. Now, what we get is a memo saying that all university librarians are tasked to help us acquire proper copyright for our learning materials, easily in the hundreds across course packs and courses. All this a week before opening. Good luck with that. Okay. Anyway, so there are other support systems. Okay. What happens then to students at the receiving end of a well-meaning but an untrained faculty's course packs? Will the university shoulder the costs of their anxiety medications or even anxiety meds of the faculty? Right? Because I imagine that many of us were striving towards the closest possible version of our face-to-face classrooms in online form, rather than creating an entirely new class in digital form. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. No, before that, there you go. Now, just a little bit on the impacts of the modality changes on the time requirements and class size. I mean, 2 things specific to the pedagogical practices in the arts and humanities. In my department, we did our research. We looked into the implications of remote teaching in 2 areas of inquiry, class size, faculty loading. We incorporated our research into a position paper submitted with our program review. I can give you copies if you want. We don't know who read our position, but we did, we based our classes on our research, our class offerings, that is. In gist, okay, what we found is this. For class size, given the feedback-heavy and discussion-based learning in arts and humanities, the optimal class size in the online mode is 12. Okay? We open classes with 15, but even that is far less than our usual 25. For faculty load, we studied all the research about time required to teach arts and humanities courses online or remotely. And the answer simply is it takes roughly the same amount of time to teach 12 units face-to-face as it does to teach 9 units online or remote. Okay. This, of course, does not include the 85% more effort it takes to design an online class for the first time, and of this under normal circumstances. So we followed the research and offered smaller classes and gave each faculty member no more than 9 teaching units, believing that teaching anything above 9 units should count as an overload. I don't understand the loading system. Never mind. Basta dapat above 9, overload na yun, because teaching 9 online is like teaching 12 face-to-face. Anyway, okay. But what are we getting? The past few days, we've been getting memos from OVCAA, from OVPAA, telling us that we have to open more classes or open up more sections to accommodate students because there is great student demand. And, my question is why? All the research shows us that that is not optimal. All the research shows us that classes will fall apart if you try and do this. So why are we being asked? Our choices are research-based. Okay, where's the support? There are unclear rules about loading, compensation. We're getting what, 9,000? I mean, for writing textbooks, we're essentially writing textbooks when we write course guides. And if someone offered me 9,000 to write a textbook, I'd probably laugh. Okay, why make this the faculty's burden? Is my question. Can't we, at this late stage, consider reducing student load to 9 units or making, registration this semester optional, not counting towards MRR or graduating with honors or any of that? Because we really simply do not have the teaching manpower in this new mode. Okay? We don't. Anyway, next slide, please. All right. In the humanities, we continuously train our students to be aware of context. Okay? So what happens when we train our own critical eyes on the context of our current situation? Our context is not just a shift to online or remote, but an emergency shift to online or remote. Faculty are armed with very little and students with even less. Why are we forcing ourselves to perform at or close to full capacity as if things were normal? I mean, I can't stand that next, normal, better, normal, new normal. Nothing is normal. It's all abnormal, okay? We're living through a horribly managed pandemic in this country with very real effects. And I'll just give you 2 specific to the arts and humanities. One, a large proportion of our arts and humanities faculty are female. Okay? Many are also homemakers in lockdown, supervising households, kids who are online too. I mean, this is my life, for example. I'm not just an academic preparing my own course guides. I'm also the canteen and the tutor, for my 2 boys who are doing online school themselves. The workload is intense and it's not normal. Okay. Second, we are living through a time of great unemployment. But mind you, for the arts and humanities, that unemployment is not out there. We are hit by this too, especially if we secure supplementary income in the creative industries, which have been shuttered since March. Especially if we have family members, friends in the creative industries who we now have to support or help out because they have been unable to work. Okay? Just because we are still gainfully employed by UP as UP faculty does not mean we don't suffer the effects of the unemployment and this economic crisis. Okay. Anyway, last slide, please. Last slide. There you go. Just to explain the title, you may have seen the little Hamlet quotes populating my slides. These little quotes are all from Hamlet. That's the way I organize my thoughts, not in topics and outlines. And they all have, like, I guess sometimes the relationship to the text is countertextual. Sometimes it's ironic. But we're all in the arts and humanities. We love to interpret, so interpret them as you may. But my title comes from Readiness is All. It's, of course, a line from Hamlet, and this is the full line. If it be not now, it is not to come. If it be not to come, it will be now. If it be not now, yet it will come. The readiness is all. In these lines, Hamlet is talking about death. But if you look at the line, we may as well be talking about remote learning. Okay? Because if it's not now, if it's now, it's means it's not coming anymore. If it's not coming anymore, it means it's now. And if it's not now, yet it will come. There's this sense of inevitability that this is where education is headed. But what Hamlet has to say, or what Shakespeare has to say about all this inevitability, is that the readiness is all. My question is, are we ready? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Judy. Wow, that was a... Parang nagising po yung diwa ko din sa inyong presentation. Thank you so much for that. There were a lot of points that I got the opportunities for digital artifacts, no? And then the many challenges associated with class size and faculty loading. Meron po tayong, may nag-comment po sa chat, si Professor Nogay, sabi niya, having sections for low-tech students is a good idea. And then si Prof. Ella Hernandez din po, UP showing compassion for students, but not to UP profs. That seems to be parang what she got out of that presentation. And then, very insightful daw po, sabi ni Professor Notarte Balangkit, and thank you for that presentation, and that they agree with all the points you raised. Okay po.
We're preaching to the choir here. We're preaching to the choir.
Thank you po. We will hear po more of these. May nakikita po ako mga naka-raise ng hand. So okay lang po ba if we, in the meantime po, can we direct po our comments and questions po in the Q&A panel, at least po din sa mga nasa Zoom. We'll just keep the conversation going po, just so we keep the time. But we will do our best po to call you and accommodate you as soon as all our panelists are finished. Okay po? Thank you po. Ma'am Judy, thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
Okay po. Sige po, maybe we can hear some more of the opportunities and challenges, no? Opportunities and challenges naman po na associated with teaching skills that require a physical space, that require equipment or face-to-face assessment. No? And for that po, I'd like to call in Dean Vern de la Peña from the College of Music. No? And maybe he can also share us within 20 minutes, kung kaya ni Dean, within 20 minutes, how they're preparing and the challenges that they're also experiencing. Plus, if there are some slivers of hope in their college. Hi, Dean. Good afternoon.
Magandang hapon sa inyong lahat.
Thank you so much.
Kumusta? Narinig niyo ba ako?
Yes, Dean.
Okay, yeah. So ang gagawin ko ngayon ay hindi coming from the point of view of an expert in remote learning, kundi ibabahagi ko lang sa inyo ang karanasan namin so far sa Kolehiyo ng Musika. Nung isang araw, naimbitahan ako mag-keynote speech sa isang conference. Ang title ng conference ko doon ay The Day the Music Almost Died, kung kakilala niyo si Dan McLean. Pagkat ganun po ang pakiramdam ng mga musiko, parang pinaslang ang musika. Wala akong maalala sa kasaysayan na ipinagbawal ang kumanta. Alam mo yung pagkanta na pinagmamalaki namin na nakakabuti sa inyong kalooban, nakakabuti sa inyong kalagayan, sa health. Ngayon, pinagdududahan na natin dahil nakakasanhi ng pagpasa ng virus. Ang College of Music ay 104 years bukas. Kaya maligayang bati sa mga kasama kong musiko ng bayan. Pero kagaya nga ng sinasabi ko, sa dami ng pinagdaanan ng Kolehiyo ng Musika, kasama na dyan yung gera, kasama na dyan yung martial law. Isa ito sa siguro mabigat na hamon sa amin. Para mas maintindihan nyo siguro yung aming eksperyensya, subukan kong ipaliwanag sa inyo dahil hindi rin marami ang nakakaintindi sa pamantasan kung ano ba ang nature ng College of Music, no? Ganito ang inilarawan ng aming dating dekano, si Dean Buen Consejo. Meron dalawang panig ang College of Music. Kung kami ay isang bahay, meron sigurong dalawang haligi. Yung unang haligi o yung unang panig ay yung panig ng mga scholar at akademiko at hindi nagkakalayo ang wangis niyan sa mga ibang unit sa universidad. At yung pangalawang panig naman ay ang panig ng mga artista. Alam nyo nung tinatag ang kolehiyo namin nung 1916, ito ay isang konserbatoryo at naging kolehiyo lang kami nung 1960s. So itong panig ng mga artista doon nag-uugat sa sinabi ng iba ay makaluma siguro, ngunit talagang mayaman na tradisyon. At ito ay kadalasang nakabase sa master-apprentice type of teaching. Now, bagamat malaki ang hamon sa dalawang panig na ito, sa panig ng mga scholar at akademiko at sa panig ng mga artista, hindi ko na ibabahagi yung panig ng mga akademiko at scholar dahil pareho na rin yun na na-experience ninyo. No? Ang malaking hamon para sa amin ay yung sa panig ng mga artista. At yun ang gusto kong bigyan ng pansin sa hapong ito. Pero bago yan, let me share with you kung ano na yung paghahanda na ginawa ng College of Music. No? Nung Marso pa lamang, nung napabalitang baka mag-shift na tayo sa remote teaching, nalala nyo bago isinuspend yung second sem, agad-agad kami nagtatag ng Academic Contingency Plan Ad Hoc Committee. At ang trabaho ng Academic Contingency Plan Ad Hoc Committee na yan ay gabayan ang kolehiyo sa transition sa remote learning. Sila ang magkakalap ng information tungkol sa mga online platforms at lahat ng technology na kakailanganin at sila ang gagabay sa aming mga kaguruan. Ang binuo ito ng karamihan ng junior faculty dahil sila yung digital natives, no? Mula sa iba't ibang departments para makapture namin yung iba-ibang context na pagtuturo na kailangan gawin. Karamihan sa kanila mga lecturer pero naging very dedicated sila through the lockdown at dahil dyan nakapaggawa kami ng sarili naming webinar series na naka-focus talaga doon sa aming mga pangangailangan. Bukod dyan, noong mga panahong yon, nung Marso pa lamang, dahil merong kaunting naipon ang Kolehiyo ng Musika, agad nag-decide ang aming CEB na mag-earmark ng 2.8 million para lang sa infrastructure improvement at connectivity support. Of course, yung pag in-earmark namin yung 2.8 million sa savings namin, dapat namin ipaalam muna yon sa UP sa Diliman at agad namang in-approve yon ng Diliman. No? Yan ay mapupunta sa pagbili ng mga gamit, pagbili ng mga laptop, suporta sa faculty at staff para sa online cost, at ang pag-set up ng mga streaming stations sa aming kolehiyo. Bagamat madali itong in-approve, yung procurement process at saka implementasyon dahil sa alam niyo naman masalimuot na mga pamamalakad ng ating gobyerno, hindi ganun kadali. Finally, tinamaan din yung aming admissions. Alam niyo sa College of Music, bukod sa kukuha ka ng UPCAT, ang mga applicants, kailangan din sila kumuha ng special music entrance exam na 3 parts. Theory, tapos yung auditions, at finally yung interview. At nagawa namin yon sa pamamagitan ng UVLE online. Kauna-unahan siguro yon na entrance exam na in-administer via online sa Diliman. At dahil sa malaking tulong ng UVLE, naiahon yun at nakapag-admit kami ng mga estudyante sa semestreng ito. Okay. So balik ako dun sa dalawang panig ng kolehiyo, yung panig ng mga scholar at akademiko at yung panig ng mga artista. Gagaya na sinabi ko, magtutuon na lang ako sa aking diskusyon sa artist side. Yung sa artist side, sa aming mga kurso, may dalawang uri. No? Ang una rito ay yung solo performance classes o courses na one-on-one and teaching. At yan ay nag-uugat sa malalim na tradisyon ng master-apprentice style of approach, no? At yung pangalawa, yung performance classes. Ito yung mga ensemble, chorus, orchestra, etc. Now, bagamat sa mga ating discussion, no, ay dinidistinguish natin yung remote learning, nabanggit nga kanina, at ang online. Para sa performance classes, talaga pong online ang nararapat. Hindi natin pwedeng gamitin remote learning lang dahil ang kailangan ay online at synchronous. Ibig sabihin live, one-on-one or one-to the ensemble teaching. Kasi dati nang may asynchronous na ginagawa ang mga estudyanteng yan. Mag-meet sila ng teacher nila ng 1 hour a week o 30 minutes a week. Pero every day, magpa-practice sila ng 3 to 4 hours dun sa kanilang instrumento. Tuloy yan. Yun yung asynchronous part. Kailangang masubaybayan sila ng teacher kada linggo. Pag hindi sila nagkita ng isang linggo, napakalaki ng mawawala. So, sa madaling salita, para sa amin, ang pangangailangan talaga ay yung online para magturo ng performance. So doon mag-uumpisa ang lahat ng problema, yung technical difficulties unang-una. Dahil College of Music kami, napaka-importante ng sound quality. Na sa level ng ating technology ngayon, wala pa doon, ano? So, yun ang unang angal ng mga teacher. Paano mo alam kung tama yung tulog ng tinuturuan mo, no? I-interpret mo kung ano yung ginagawa niya, pero hindi mo naririnig yung tamang tulog na dapat niyang gawin. Okay? Bukod pa dyan, yung synchronicity, yung time lag, and so on. At saka yung immediacy ng pagtuturo. Alam nyo, ang pagtuturo, we deal with human bodies. No? Kahit na instrumento ang hawak niya, kailangan nandun mismo yung teacher at hahawakan niya yung kamay at ipapakita. Ngayon, kung sa remote, sa online, may muestra mo yun, napakatagal bago sila magkaintindihan kung ano yung gustong ipagawa ng teacher. Sa lahat ng gap na ganon, dumadagdag yung frustration, dumadagdag yung stress, and so on. Kasama dyan, for instance, ang pagbasa ng score. So for example, ako ay piano teacher, no? Yung aking estudyante ay bumabasa ng score. Pag meron akong gustong i-pinpoint, mamarkahan ko yung score at sasabihin ko, ito dapat ang gawin mo. Ngayon, dahil may distance, dahil may remote, hindi magawa ng teacher yon. Kaya mag-uusap muna sila, napakatagal bago sila magkaintindihan kung anong bara at anong mismong nota ang tinutukoy ng teacher. Of course, merong mga library services at pwede kong pag-usapan yun mamaya na pwedeng digital yung score na ibig sabihin pareho yung binabasa ng teacher at ng estudyante at mamarkahan ng teacher from where she is at mababasa naman ng estudyante from where she is in real time. No? At sinusubukan namin kuhanin yung service na yon, pero again, kagaya sinabi ko, dahil sa hirap ng ating procurement processes, mukhang hindi yata matutuloy. Okay? Ang susunod na difficulty ay yung availability ng instrument para sa mga estudyante. Kanina lamang kausap ko yung isang chair, no? Kung ang pinagdidiskusyonan natin ngayon ay paano ipapa-deliver, ipapa-courier service ang course pack. Kami inisip namin paano kaya kami magpapa-courier service ng koto o ng kulintang and so on. Dahil walang sariling ganong instrumento ang mga bata. No, maraming iba-ibang mga majors, may sarili silang gamit nila. Pero yung iba wala at kailangan mong ipaabot sa estudyante yon. Kagaya ng simpleng piano. No? Yung mga estudyante nag-aaral ng piano sa grand piano na nasa aming kolehiyo. Sa bahay, kung ano-anong piano lang meron sila, syempre, hindi mo maasahan. Maaaring digital piano and so on. So, mawawala yung buong essence ng pagtuturo ng teacher kung paano yung tamang tunog, kung paano yung tamang tipa, and so on dahil nga sa limitasyon na yon. At hindi lang yon, hindi lang yung instrumento mismo, yung physical conditions kung nasaan yung estudyante. So, kasama sa pag-aaral ay dapat magawa mo yung tamang tunog para marinig ka sa isang malaking bulwagan. For example, kung singer ka. But can you imagine kung nakatira ka sa isang masikip na komunidad, ang isang tenor at bigla siyang kakanta ng arya, mahihiya siya dahil mabubulabog ang mga kapitbahay. No? Imagine niyo na lang kung anong gagawin ng ballet dancer na kailangang sumayaw doon sa kanilang maliit na kwarto o kusina o bakuran. Now, so far, ang sinasabi kong mga problema ay doon sa mga one-to-one. Ang pinakamahirap sa lahat ay yung mga klaseng ensemble. Meron kaming chorus classes, orchestra, band, chamber, and so on. Ito halos imposibleng gawin. No? Ang gagawin na lang namin, i-adjust yung expectations, i-adjust yung requirements. So, kung pinapapanood kayo ngayon, naglabasan simula ng lockdown, lahat ng virtual choir, virtual orchestra, and so on, lahat po yun ay edited. No, ibig sabihin, they did not sing in real time together. Ang importanteng tinuturo sa ensemble ay yung kung paano mag-perform, yung sensitivity na mag-perform, mag-communicate, makaramdam, and so on, ng bawat estudyante. Wala lahat yon sa online. Unless dumating tayo sa panahon na very advanced na yung technology natin at magagawa natin yon in real time. Pero ngayon, kumantang sabay sa Zoom, for example, hindi tayo pwede magsalita ng sabay. Sa isang tao lang magsasalita. Paano pang magdedueto? Pero hindi lamang sa performance classes, sa mga ensemble nangyayari yan. Kasi kahit solo classes, solo instruments, kailangan nilang tumugtog kasama ang akompanista. So, hindi namin alam kung paano gagawin yun. Mangyayari ang akompanista, pre-recorded, sasabay yung soloista, pero nawala na yung ensemble essence, no? Dahil sumasabay siya sa -1. Okay? At siguro ang isa pa, ang isa sa pinaka-importante sa lahat ay yung public performance. Yun yung isang elemento na talagang nawala na. Yung public performance sa amin, whether it be academic na required ng klase, kagaya ng recitals and so on, or extracurricular, kagaya ng mga kumakanta sa UP Concert Chorus, nakita ko si Ma'am Jai, hi Ma'am Jai, o tumutugtog sa UP Symphony Orchestra o sa UP Jazz, napakalaking bahagi sa pag-aaral ng mga estudyante yon. Of course, pwede mong sabihin, pwede namang gawing online yon, no? Pero hindi sila tinuruan para mag-perform, tinuturuan para mag-perform sa online. Iba yung sensitivities na kailangan nilang matutunan. So, kagaya ng sinasabi ko, dahil dyan, napakataas ng stress level na nangyayari. Dahil sa frustration, dahil sa problema sa technology, and so on. At yun ang una kong pangamba sa lahat. Alam nyo, bilang administrador, responsibilidad ko na i-encourage ang faculty at sabihin, hindi, kaya natin yan. Kaya natin itawid yan, and so on. Pero ang totoo nun, malalim ang aking agam-agam tungkol dyan. Lalo na pagdating sa punto ng mental health. Bago pa man mag-lockdown, ang taas na ng levels ng mga mental health cases natin at kami rin sa College of Music. Lalo na ngayong nagkaroon ng lockdown at makakadagdag pa ng stress itong ganitong klaseng sitwasyon. Dahil dito, tahasan kong sasabihin, no, na in contrast, no, to what we've been hearing, na talagang ang remote learning para sa amin, nasa performance, ay approximation lamang ng normal face-to-face learning, no? So yun ang nakakabahala sa lahat. Pero mas nakakabahala sa akin ay yung pagbabago ng mundo. Siguro na tinetrain namin itong mga estudyante sa ganitong paraan, pero yung pupuntahan nilang mundo, iba na pala. So mas malalim na tanong yon, mas malalim na tanong para sa amin, at pagso-soul searching kung ano ba dapat namin ituro ngayon sa mga estudyante, hindi na pala pwedeng mag-concert, hindi na pala practical maging member ng orchestra and so on. Of course, parang bad news lahat, marami rin namang good news. Kahit paano, napilitan kami na harapin i-confront itong technology dahil ito nga sinasabi natin ang way of the future. At dahil sa sitwasyon, napilitan kaming aralin lahat yan, napilitan kaming mag-invest sa mga gamit. So, andyan na yan. Pangalawang positive siguro na outcome nito ay yung expanded borders. Meron kaming mga programa na nahihirapan kaming humanap ng eksperto dahil lahat nasa abroad. Ngayon, pwede na nating silang imbitahin bilang overseas lecturers dahil remote learning naman. At ganun din sa mga estudyante. Yung mga estudyante sa labas, ma-access na nila yung aming pag-aaral, kagaya ng maraming gusto mag-aral ng Philippine music, pero hindi naman nila kayang pumunta rito ngayon, pwede na-expand yung borders na yon. So siguro hanggang dito muna lang yung sharing ko. Naka 20 minutos na ba ako ton? At kung may katanungan kayo, siguro pwede na natin puntahan. Salamat.
Thank you, Dean, for that. Parang ang intense nung existential crisis ngayon nung idea of performance and performing, and learning all these things. And siguro po, if we have time later, maybe we can share a preview of how you intend to teach some of the courses po na binanggit nga ninyo na might be a little difficult po to teach during this time. Okay po. Thank you, Dean. So ngayon naman po, magpipivot po tayo a little bit, no? And we're going to hear from the perspective. Hindi binanggit nga po nung susunod nating panelists na hindi talaga siya necessarily A and H, no, yung perspective kasi mas multimedia design, multimedia arts, no, yung kanilang approach. But this is also, I think, important for us to hear ano yung mga ilang strategy siguro na pwede nating makuha mula sa mga faculty from UP Open University. So, and she'll tell us more about her work and how she teaches her courses. No? So, let me welcome again from the Faculty of Information Communication Studies ng UP-OU, si Prof. Joyce Manalo. Hi, Joyce.
Hello, good afternoon po ulit.
Thank you, Joyce. So, narinig mo naman yung mga challenges nung dalawa, isa from College of Arts and Letters, isa from College of Music. No? So I wonder if there's anything na pwede sigurong magawa at this time, no? Or ano yung pwede mong ma-share to help us address some of the concerns. Yeah.
That's actually parang ngayon ko lang actually na-realize kung ano yung mga challenges na actually sinasabi na when you mentioned sa akin to when you emailed me, no, na parang they're resistant to it kasi I didn't really understand kung ano yung mga challenges nila kasi like I told you naman, hindi naman ako necessarily from the arts field, from arts and humanities. My background is communication and IT, but I love the arts and I love design and creating things. I'm very creative, so yun lang yung pinag-aralan ko. Pero it's really a different the study of arts itself is a really different field. Pero so now, no, napakinggan ko na si yung dalawa nating ibang panelists, si Dean LaVerne at si Prof. Judy, naiintindihan ko na yung challenges nila. So, well, siguro ako, ipapresent ko na din yung experiences namin, how we teach multimedia production courses in UP-OU. Kung makakatulong to sa kanila, hopefully maybe they'll pick up an idea or two. I'll be open naman then to discuss other strategies after this kung pwede. No? So, okay. So, sana ma-share ng maayos yung screen ko. Pinractice natin to kanina. Okay, so I will be talking about how we teach multimedia production courses online in UP-OU. So,
sorry, well, naka-share screen ka na ba?
Hindi pa po ba?
Wala pa siya.
Wala pa siya? Sige. Sige, share.
Okay, there you go.
How about now? Okay.
Okay, there it is. Thank you.
Okay, so ang nasi-share na screen ay yung Zoom. Tama ba?
Ang nakikita ko po ay Bachelor of Arts in Multimedia Studies.
Naging weird siya. Hold on.
Okay, no problem. So kung meron po kayong mga questions or you'd like to share something, meron pong comment from our YouTube chat box si Professor Joanna Cruz. Sabi niya, oh my, ang lalim at ang bigat ng tanong para sa performance arts faculty ni Prof. LaVerne. And I thought I had problems as a CW teacher. Yeah.
Okay, so I will be talking about how we teach multimedia production courses online. And so, ang context that ano pinanggagalingan ko nito, like sabi nga ni Prof. Judy kanina, context is important, is from the Bachelor of Arts of Multimedia Studies na program ng UPOU. So, it's our first na bachelor program and it's now fully online. As with all of the courses in UPOU, we have students from all over the world and we have students from different walks of life. Although the trend is slowly changing, dumadami na rin yung mga fresh out of senior high school namin ng mga students, mga cut takers. But when this program started, puro siya mga professionals or we have professionals, we have mga nagsa-second degree, we have retirees, we have foreigners, we have we have students with disabilities, we have students from all over the world. So yun yung context na pinanggagalingan nitong si BAMS. And it's really, when you say multimedia talaga, it's really at the intersection. Kumbaga nasa gitna siya ng information and communication spectrum with communication on one side and technology on the other. The multimedia studies is right in the middle. So yun talaga yung pinanggagalingan niya. It's not necessarily the most creative or the most artistic na program. Although almost all of us na nagpa-present were very creative to say. So we do love the arts and we're actually trying to come up with ways to make this program into something that is a little more creative, a little more innovative than this. 10 years ago, when the BAMS program was originally conceived, not just 10 years ago, but 12 years na pala, 2008, nung unang nag-start itong BAMS program, is originally siyang naisip nila ng mga proponents to be delivered through blended mode. Ang idea nila noon is that you do your studying online and then pagdating ng summer, magkakaroon sila ng parang workshop where you just create things. Doon ka matututo na gumamit ng mga software, mag-take ng pictures, create videos, audio, and all of in the different production in the different modalities of multimedia. Pero, well, nung nag-switch to online, I don't really know what happened back then. This was no longer, I don't think there was ever a batch na nag-summer workshop, maybe once. And then UPOU switched fully to online and then we started getting students who will not be able to participate if it were a blended mode. And we had to accommodate them. So, ginawa ng paraan. So we also went through a lot of transitions in order to make this program a fully online program. So that I'll have to put in a disclaimer, no? So my experience talaga is really based on the context ng UPOU, where everything is online, students have online access. I know we're talking right now about yung mga issues na na-encounter natin related dahil sa sa pandemic, na ang daming mga students na nawawala ng access. I know a lot of the residential na mga campuses, yun yung kanilang problem talaga is yung mga pag-uwi ng estudyante nila, wala silang internet access. That was not a problem for us. So my perspective with this presentation would be from students who have access at least to the internet. Yung nagagawa nila yung mga kailangan. And this would also refer to teaching in our context, yung multi-level class and with students from all walks of life. So how do we teach production courses online? So mayroon akong nilistang 4 points. I'm not sure if that really captures all that I want to talk about. I tried to streamline it for this presentation. So we have the points on being tool agnostic and learning how to learn, rethinking the role of the teacher, and experimenting with new ways of teaching. Not necessarily new siguro, but more of different other ways of teaching. So when we say being tool agnostic, simula pa lang, we need to identify the tools that we need for every production course. Kasi sa BAMS, we never really had the luxury. We never ever experienced na yung meron kaming laboratory. Like, I understand if you're in a residential na mga classes and you would have production courses such as these, pwede kayong mag-provide ng equipment to your students and the students will just go attend the class and then they would be able to use the equipment that's the property ng university. We never had this luxury kasi nga, our students are all around the world. So, umpisa pa lang ng class, even lalagay nyo na sa mga course guide, yung mga ganon, na kailangan nila itong gantong equipment. But it would obviously come with its own challenge kasi not everyone will have the same capacity to acquire the same equipment. Kaya nga nung sabi ni Sir Vern kanina, may mga instruments sa music na wala namang access yung mga estudyante nila. Diba? So we try to be as tool agnostic as possible. So, hindi lang, halimbawa, kung papasok ka sa isang residential, siguro na magtuturo ng graphic design, or meron na yung may computers doon sa computer lab na yon. Pupunta lang yung students, magagamit nila Adobe Suite, kompletong ganyan. But, of course, that would be expensive and not all of our students will have access to that. Hindi naman kami pwedeng mag-provide ng license to every student. So, that's an issue in itself. So, we try to be tool agnostic. We always have recommendations, alternatives, and we try to identify what actually do we need from these tools. Halimbawa, you only have a phone camera. Ano ba talaga, pag mag-aaral ka ba ng photography, ano yung hinahanap mo sa isang camera? Paano mo matututunan yung mga concepts? Kung phone lang yung meron ka, makikita mo talaga yung difference. So, basically, every production course, laging may ganyang usapan. Ito lang po yung meron ako. Ano, pwede po ba ito? Pwede po ba yung ganyan? O, sapat na po ba itong meron ako na microphone? Sapat na po ba itong meron ako na video camera? Or pwede po ba itong gantong software? So when students start to ask those types of questions, you always try to turn it na din into a teachable moment. So we teach the students to determine the appropriate tools. Kasi naman, when they eventually graduate and start working in the field, they would have to choose tools then to use eh. Siguro by then, they would have more resources than they do as a student. Pero they would have gotten with them na, and they would have learned already how to select the tools, what makes the tools appropriate for certain tasks, and what makes tools a good one or a bad one. So, yung mga ganun. So, kailangan lang nilang malaman from us, from the facilitators, what are they supposed to do with these tools? Ano ba yung kailangan nilang malaman? So, sabihin natin wala talaga silang access. For example, you only have a lower quality, say, microphone than someone who has a better quality microphone. And once you share your output with the class and you start listening to it critically and analytically, marirealize ng mga students na yung difference at least ng dalawang equipment na magkaiba, or marirealize na when they try two different tools, kaiba nilang gawin to dito. Kung yung kanilang camera is hindi manual, hindi masaset manually yung settings, na-understand na agad nila yung limitations from there based on their experience. So we try to be as agnostic with the tools as possible, give them as many options as possible, and if wala talaga, at least we can try to turn it into a teaching moment, teaching opportunity, na parang kung ito talaga hanggang na maintindihan nila more acutely yung mga limitations ng mga tools na gagamitin. And related with that is that they also try things for themselves. There's a big difference kasi when you just demonstrate how to use a certain thing. Maraming tayong mga demos kasi then kapag sila yung gumagawa ng mga bagay na yon on their own. So when they try things for themselves, we allow them to be more curious about it. They can opt to not do the tasks in the traditional way. They try to discover for themselves then. One example of that na related din sa tools is I discovered this kerning game on the internet by, I forgot the person who made this, Mark something. And he created this kerning game in which you can move around the letters of different words to kern them, basically to align them, adjust the spacing in between them, and then merong scores to see how close you are to the kerning of a professional typographer. And when the purpose of this, kaya siya ginagamit ko sa course ko, is just to illustrate kerning. Kasi you can talk about kerning. You can say that it's the spacing between words. You can show different examples of it. And at the same time, you want the students to be able to try it for themselves para actually maintindihan nila yung difference. Pero if they have to learn tools pa before they learn this, kung ang background lang nila, for example, is Word, and then mag-a-adjust sila doon ng letters or mag-i-install pa sila ng Adobe Illustrator or ng Inkscape or ng whatever, ng Canva, whatever tool that they have. Ito kasi, you focus na on the concept itself ng pagkukern. This website actually has other similar mga activities that we also use for that purpose. And we also try to mimic the way that students would have learned on their own. Now, when a curious student just wants to learn more about a certain topic related to multimedia, usually they browse. They would Google something and find, how do you do this? So we actually try to incorporate that kasi it's instinctive sa mga tao na kung gusto mong matutunan kung isang bagay, ganun yung ginagawa niya. One of my activities tuloy sa graphics and multimedia course ko is to ask them to select a tutorial for a skill or a method that they want to learn using the tools that they have. So naturally, if you have a huge class, iba-iba yon, iba-iba yung mga gagawin nila, and they would have to select kung anong gusto na matutunan. And they would also end up selecting tools na adjusted to their skill level. Remember, in UPOU kasi, iba-iba yung skill level ng students namin. So some are actually already graphic artists, while some are fresh from high school na pero enthusiastic about design. And meron din namang mga hindi from another field and they've never encountered design aside from the bare minimum in their life. So iba-iba yung levels nila, but when they choose their own learning materials, they choose their own tutorials, they familiarize themselves with their tools and they get to adjust it to their own level of learning. So this is one of the, I think, important ways that I teach graphics to my students with the objective not, kasi hindi mo naman matuturo lahat ng skills eh. Ang dami-dami yung kailangan matutunan sa graphics. Kung skill-based talaga siya, practice lang talaga, and actually trying it, trial and error is the way you learn it. What's important though is that whenever we do activities like this, we ask them what they learned. So we ask questions that facilitate reflective learning. What did you find difficult about it? Where was it up to your expectations? Did you have trouble with this? Was it easier than you expected? Kung ano yung kailangan natin silang ipag-reflect on their experiences. So I think if there's anything that's anyone could possibly take away from this, is that one of the most important part of teaching online ng ganitong klase ng mga topics is that kailangan talaga ng reflection. Yung reflection, yung yung reflection actually yung i-assess mo and not necessarily the output. Kung ano yung, kailangan nilang i-elaborate kung ano yung natutunan nila. Kung may nadagdag bang knowledge sa kanila, kung na-meet ba nila yung, sa palagay ba nila na-meet yung objective. So that's really what reflective learning is all about. It's not about kung ano yung nagawa mo, nakapag-produce ka ng something that would meet some other person's standards, but rather whether you were able to improve on yourself. Yun yung, when you're enabling students to learn how to learn, that's really the most important thing that we could impart to them. Related with that, we also make our students go through peer assessment. I know this is supposed to be about resisting the rubric, no? Pero we do use rubrics when evaluating siguro mga designs. So this one in particular, I'm showing you a screenshot of one of the submissions to my activities in my class, which is typography. So they create a poster using certain instructions, ganyan, and their classmates will be the one to assess them. Ang advantage nito is that usually over time this class has gotten so big and so out of my control. Parang umabot na yata ng 90 plus or 100 plus yung students, and I cannot give feedback to each one of them anymore individually. But through peer assessment, they're able to get feedback somehow from their peers. And at the same time, they learn how to critique, how to articulate what makes a good or bad design. And that's also an important thing, sometimes even more important than the execution, because the execution can be improved over time with practice and patience. But learning what makes a good and bad design is more intuitive. It's something that you actually try to look at, try to learn when you look at something critically. So that's really what we try to impart with these types of activities. So that napaka-important nung ganyang klase na activities for us, which is why I encourage them to do peer assessment. Not just because, well, it's common kasi, di ba, when you do Coursera, laging may peer assessment. Pero when you actually make the peer assessment part of the activity, in fact, yung assessment nga nila yung i-assess mo. Di ba? So, marirealize mo kung natutunan talaga nila what makes good or bad design rather than just the skills of it. With that, we also end up rethinking the teacher's role. No? Kasi ang dami ng tutorials na nakita natin. They learn from tutorials. They assess their peers. So ano pa ba yung magiging role ng teachers? This is another one of the, we could probably say, principles that in FICS, which is the invisible teacher. Kasi we rethink our roles kung ano ba talaga yung may co-contribute namin sa ganitong setup. Diba? Yung when kailangan ba talagang ako yung nakikita nilang gumagawa na nagde-demonstrate ng particular skill, or can they just watch a YouTube video of someone else far better than I am? And they would probably learn from that person more. Sino ba naman ako compared to all the experts that are accessible to them on the internet, diba? So kung ganun yung situation, ano ba yung magiging role ko? And on top of that, we have this rise in autodidacticism. I hope I don't get in trouble for this, pero this video by a musician in the Philippines, no, na he talked about why Filipinos should not go to college. Kasi naman daw, yung mga skills, natututunan mo naman from the internet. So, bakit nga naman ba kapag mag-aaral, di ba? Ano yung benefit nun? So, there was a whole issue about that, I think 2 years ago. But so we have to think about what do the students need from us in particular that they cannot get anywhere else, since everything is happening online. Ano yung tayo lang yung makakapagbigay sa kanila? And I think that's guidance, mentorship, and challenge. By guidance, I mean yung we nudge them in the right direction. Yung pag-design natin ng mga courses natin, yung pag-observe natin sa kanila as they progress through the course and through their learning, yun yung ibibigay natin sa kanila. Mentorship, by that I mean yung feedback, advice, tsaka usually they seek permission. When they're just trying to learn on their own, they don't know whether they're doing things right. And they're very insecure about it. Pero when you're there to give them permission, sige, itry mo kung gusto mo. Sometimes that's all they need. And to learn those types of things. And finally, a challenge. As I've mentioned before, we have students na experts na, masasabi nating graphic artists na sila, photographers na sila, videographers na sila, professionals paid higher than their teachers. Pero what they can get from us is we can still ask them questions, ask them to think critically about what they've been doing their whole lives. And they're actually thankful for it. They were able to see, parang they've actually told us no, that they can see their work in a different light by taking our courses and by taking our courses. So it's actually a pretty good thing. And apologize my poor attempts of being provocative, no? But one of the things that we had to accept when we were teaching these production courses in UPOU was that students are probably better than me. I'm not gonna say you, no, pero so kasi we do have students, parang they have access to all this information and these tools, and they try things for themselves. They know how to learn by themselves. What's stopping these students, aside from experience, I guess, from being better than their teachers? So yung baga, kailangan nating tanggapin that it's possible that these students that we're teaching are better than us. But that's actually a good thing, no? Kasi we can have them, we can actually enlist the students yung expertise ng mga students yun ang magagaling. In an environment like sa online environment namin, we have a lot of discussion forums and we have these free-to-play na mga places. And they can just communicate as freely. Hindi siya yung katulad sa classroom na may teacher sa harap and nakaupo lang silang lahat nakatingin sa teacher. Ang nangyayari during the classroom namin, it's more asynchronous and they're more free to just post whenever they feel like it. So parang mas eager sila na mag-share. And so that way, we can take advantage of dun sa mga students natin who are better than us. And this is another thing about UPOU and FICS, that we encourage a culture of sharing. So parang ito naman kasi tinuturo natin ng mga production courses, hindi naman to programming na kapag nag-share ka ng code mo or nag-plagiarize ka ng something, wala na, hindi na sila natuto, di ba? When they share their inspirations or they share feedback, they give critique to their classmates in a setting like that. In a place where they're free to do that. Parang marami talaga siya natututo. Kahit yung hindi siya masyadong magaling na mga students, once they ask their questions, mapapaisip ka din eh. And then when you answer someone else's questions, natututo ka rin that way. So we really encourage a culture of sharing. This is a Discord server for one of our classes. We tried using Discord last sem. And we tried to make it in unofficial. Parang casual lang siya na parang tambayan. But you can post announcements there for our class. MMS 174 is graphics, by the way. So what happened here, what we observed was that yung mga students kasi, since as I mentioned, dumadami na nga yung mga Gen Z namin na students, yung mga fresh from high school or younger, they no longer adapt as well to the older web forms of posting, yung mga forums, tsaka mga blogs. Yun yung mga pinapagawa natin traditionally sa online learning. But actually, when you observe how the patterns of how Gen Zs use the internet, they're more used to short form. So when we switch to Discord, when we encourage them to use Discord for sharing, and they were more interactive. That's at least what I have noticed. So maybe not necessarily as in-depth as posting on a discussion forum or a blog, pero they were more willing to share, more willing to ask than what I observed sa mga official formal namin ng mga discussion forums. Parang, and they would converse in a very casual way, like they were really just talking to other people the way they would in the Discord server. So since they're used to short form and chatting and using tools like Discord, parang natap din namin a little bit yung kanilang instinct to share and to help. So that's one of the things that I was actually surprised to see. And finally, this is the last point of my presentation, was we also try to experiment with other ways to teach. I wouldn't say new or wouldn't say different, maybe creative ways to teach, but we really look at our learning objective and see how can we deliver this better, how can we get the most out of it. So I'm going to give an example of this calamansi painting exercise that I have in my graphics course. So at the beginning of this activity, I posted 2 tutorials that we created, one for beginners and one for someone who's a little more advanced. And the objective of this is that so that they would learn how to paint a calamansi. When you paint a calamansi digitally, you have to understand the shapes, the values, and at the same time, you will experience yung having layers on your work and how the destructive property of raster na medium na kapag nagpatong yon or napatungan mo, hindi mo na mabubura, hindi siya basta-basta na ando, or pag nag-merge yung dalawang layers, hindi mo na mapaghihiwalay that easily. So gusto namin ma-appreciate nila yon. As usual, they have to follow the instructions, and just like I mentioned before, kailangan nilang mag-reflect. So the requirement for this is, aside from just following the instructions and painting your own calamansi, you also have to take screenshots of your own process and describe what you're doing. And what happens here is that these students, kasi ang dami ring iba-iba na mga styles, because each individual student, kahit pa sabihin mong they're following instructions, they're still doing things differently. They see the world differently. So what happened here was that parang yung bawat reflection nila with the screenshots and descriptions of what they're doing and reflection on what they're learning, parang naging kanya-kanya na rin siyang tutorial. So we started with 2 tutorials that we made, and then almost each submission of the student can stand as a tutorial on its own in a slightly different style of painting one particular thing. And that's a whole lot of resource to choose from for the next batch of students who want to learn how to paint a calamansi eventually. Another thing that we experimented with, this is my colleague's project actually, was using virtual environment as a sort of equalizer. So he was teaching photography at the time, and instead of diving in right away to using a camera, he sort of encouraged students to try it in a virtual environment, this Second Life, which is I think it's an online game where you can have, well, a second life and just walk around an environment. And you can take the screenshots or pictures using the in-game camera from any angle that you want. So you're not limited by physics, you're not limited by equipment, at least not the camera equipment. And then, so it sort of equalizes the playing field because you're all going to be looking at the same thing. You can all go anywhere. So let's say you're a student who's wheelchair bound, and you're trying to take pictures of things. You will be limited in your mobility, but when you're doing it in a virtual environment, you can take pictures of anything, anyone. And since the objective of this would be to learn composition and develop an eye for camera angles, and they will all be able to learn the same thing. Although, as we found out later on, virtual environment also has its downsides. We actually have experienced problems with technology as well, because using these types of things, if the students, say, internet connection or graphics card isn't strong enough, there would still be a slight difference in the quality of the image generated. But still, it's a good tool that we have explored for this. And and another thing was that the game has a learning curve. Another way to explore this, if you wouldn't use Second Life, something that's more readily available to the students, maybe they play other games, maybe Witcher or Skyrim, or even they could try a more general that everyone could have would be Google Maps. So I mean, barring the distortion that you get from the camera angles of the Google Street View, you can actually, explore there and see if you could generate some images without using a camera. I think this is the last slide, but another thing that we explored was using ePortfolio. So this is basically our foray into expanding how we do reflective and authentic assessment. And it's served, so when students have projects in their different production courses, instead of just uploading it to our course site, they were allowed to use this ePortfolio. So they would post their work here and their reflection here, and eventually, over time, they would be able to develop a body of work. So it becomes their learning log, and they could see their growth throughout the different courses that they've taken. And it's transparent because everyone can see everyone else's work. And as I've mentioned, in these types of field, or in these types of topics, there's really no big issue about seeing other people's works and copying them, at least not as much. And you'll be able to see who did what. And finally, once they've compiled everything, if they would choose to do so and they did well in their courses, they could actually use their school portfolio when they seek jobs for the first time. They already have their body of work in a beautiful package. So I think, and I'm not sure if I could, but that's some of the ways that we teach production courses, multimedia production courses in UPOU. So I hope this was helpful kahit kaunti dun sa, and especially since now that I understand that they're thinking of different problems than we were able to solve. So if you have questions, I put my email down here, and I really hope this was helpful even a little bit.
Thank you so much, Prof. Joyce. I think yung mga keywords natin so far ay yung approximation and the other thing that you said, parang So hindi natin necessarily maituturo yung exact skill no, sa mga bata, but maybe there are things that at least yung mga principles for now, no, hanggat hindi pa, yung nabanggit nga ni Ma'am Judy kanina, this is an emergency remote situation, and I wonder if these are things that maybe we can be a little bit flexible about during this time. Okay, thank you so much po. So now we're going to open the floor po for some of your questions and some of the points po that you'd like to raise. No, we have some questions in the Q&A panel that really parang ang essence po is asking, what now? No? How do we move forward from here? No, ano yung pwede po nating magawa? And shortly po, we will hear from AVP Vanji po ano yung mga pwede nating mga plans regarding our current situation. But I wonder if there's anything else that you'd like to ask and say po regarding the conversation po that we have so far. So dito pa rin po si LaVerne, si Prof. Judy, at syempre si Ma'am Joyce for your questions, no, and comments. Hindi ko pa alam naka-raise yung hand ni VC Lujay. I'm not sure if this is a mistake or if she really wants to say something, but VC Lujay, I give you permission to talk po. So if you can unmute yourself po, and I don't know if you want to say a few words. Okay. So baka napindot lang ni Ma'am Lujay. But sige po. So while waiting for po, I don't know if there's anything else that you'd like to discuss about this. Kasi kung habang nag-iisip po tayo ng mga pwedeng itanong or banggitin, no, we're keeping track of them po. Maybe I can ask EVP Vanji to say a few words po. Maybe to talk about future plans as we move forward in case ito pong ating current situation will move until the next semester, or any reflections po upon hearing po what our faculty members shared.
Hi, Ton.
Hi, ma'am.
Good afternoon sa lahat. Hello, good
Thank
afternoon.
you, ma'am.
Okay. Teka, paano ba to? So, okay lang na hindi ko ma-start yung video? Nawala ka, Ton.
Can you try again po? Sorry po, the video po.
Okay.
There you go. Thank you for being here.
Yeah. Kailangan ko din i-try itong ring light kasi may nagbigay sa akin ng ring light. Nandiyan sa audience. So maraming salamat sa nagbigay. Sabi ko hindi ako sanay nagre-ring light. Ayan, na-try ko na yung ring light. So medyo parang mukhang nakikita na yung ano. Okay, reflection. So I made some notes, no? Teka lang ha. So syempre, una sa lahat, maraming salamat sa ating resource persons, Professor Judy Celine Ick, Dean Vern de la Peña, Professor Joyce May Manalo of UPOU, and congratulations, Dean Vern, to the 104th anniversary of the College of Music tomorrow. Madalas na rin nating naririnig, no, na walang playbook dito sa present situation natin. And we actually planned as best we can to be prepared as best we can. No? And in planning and preparing, we do not downplay the challenges and anxiety that our stakeholders, students, faculty, staff, and administrators as well are facing. So kung halimbawa, kasi nabasa ko yung comments dun sa chat box at saka sa Q&A panel. So kung halimbawa may perception na ang compassion ay para lang sa estudyante at hindi kasama ang kaguruan, ako na po ang humihingi ng paumanhin kung nagkulang ang administrasyon sa pagpapakita ng suporta sa kanyang kaguruan. Kaya I guess one thing that I'd like, as a form of reflection, nakita ko din, communication is key ngayon dito sa hinaharap natin. Napaka-importante, napaka-critical ng communication. Kasi katulad nun, marami sa atin nasa loob lang ng bahay, hindi nakakalabas. Nami-miss natin ng husto yung interaction natin with our colleagues. Pag nandun tayo sa building natin, may makakasalubong tayo at magkukumustahan. We miss that kind of interaction. And communication is key in facing these challenges and future challenges. Nabanggit nga ni Prof. Judy kanina, yung gearing up, no? So maybe it was inappropriate kasi it seemed too mechanistic. So apologies for that. But it was actually meant for all, and maybe we could have found a better phrase, no? But yeah, so yon, communication is key. So as I've said, we've tried to be as prepared and ready as we can, and we laid down the structure. No, and we started with the town halls and dialogues that began in early June. We had the course Redesign 101 launched July 13 to help us prepare course packs. And this was followed by a series of webinars conducted CU-wide, organized by the different CUs. And I have to acknowledge UP Diliman. Thank you very much to UP Diliman, to Ton, especially, Sir Ton, especially, for all the webinars that you have organized and shared to our faculty system-wide. And I know these are viewed not only by our fellow faculty, our colleagues, but also by colleagues from other higher education institutions. So even with that activities that we started in June, there's still much to do. And I don't confess to know all the answers. So may tanong nga, sabi mo nga, Ton, ano ba yung future na gagawin? Ano pa ba yung, merong isang question na parang, meron dito sa question and answer box nga na paano pa yung direction for this. So there's still much to do. We continue to plan and be prepared as best we can. And a key phrase that I always remember na nakikita natin sa memo ng OVPAA is iterative decision making. So we plan, we put it into action, we assess, and then we refine decisions and plan again. So perhaps it is in this process that we will find solutions, innovations to address the challenges faced, for example, by the performing arts. Hindi lang siguro yung performing arts, So I'm sure we have colleagues sa College of Human Kinetics, also facing some challenges, in delivering courses remotely. So I acknowledge also the point raised by Dean Byrne that in the case of their course offerings, they will have to do synchronous online sessions. Kasi paano nga ba naman, diba? So syempre kailangan mo makita yung performance ng student mo, So in this particular type of courses, these are needed. And perhaps it is also through this process that we find opportunities, such as that mentioned by Dean Byrne, like the expanded borders. So I don't profess to know the answer to all. But I guess ang importante is we keep the lines of communication open. We talk, we support each other. And in the way forward, I guess we do not lose sight also of the mandate of our university being the national university. So service, honor, and excellence. And madalas ko din marinig, to whom much is given, much is expected. So whether we like it or not, as faculty of the National University, we have the burden of responsibility. I agree with Professor Judy Celine Ick. Readiness is all. But in the absence of a playbook, we will not know how prepared we are until we actually do it. So I hope we can draw strength from the support of our academic unit, from our CU, and also from the administration, as well as from our colleagues. And maybe take comfort also that we are all in this together. In fact, globally, diba? We are all facing these challenges, and we are all trying to find answers also. But in behalf of the administration, I'd like to give the assurance that we will continue to work with you and provide the support that you need. So your proposals, comments, and suggestions are always welcome. So again, thank you very much, Sir Ton. Thank you very much to our resource persons and also to everyone who made time, to take part in this webinar. Salamat. Good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Vanji. Mukhang, back to the drawing board po ulit tayo sa community. Mukhang marami po tayong kailangan.
Di ba parang ang natin is support na, di ba? So eto na tayo, mag-umpisa na tayo. So I guess ang susunod is we just make sure that while we're starting this remote learning, we're still there to provide the support needed by the faculty. So tingnan ko lang yung comment na meron isang comment kasi doon sa Q&A, concrete measures, ayun. From from admin about concrete measures they intend to pursue after this webinar to truly support arts and humanities teaching in the university. So yeah, so what are these concrete measures? I guess I can say that the concrete measure is to provide the support. Pero in what way? Can you tell us how we can support you? Diba? So like for example, Professor Judy was saying na what comes to mind, for example, is yung, I remember when we were doing the exercise on, matagal na to, yung sa self-assessment, diba? So parang yung palaging yung metrics for the arts and for the science and technology classes not applicable to the arts and humanities. So what will be applicable, no? So what will be the proposal for that? Yeah. So, yun. Sir Ton?
Yes po. Yeah. So, kagaya nga po nung nabanggitin kanina, this is really, alam po natin na since we started this, we've heard a lot of proposals din po and things that we try to incorporate in the many policies na binaba po natin so far. So hopefully po ay, hindi naman po ito simula ng discussion because the discussions have continued, but hopefully po this will, we can formulate a lot more concrete forms of support po until, the semester progresses po. Maybe up until this school year. Yeah. So thank you so much.
Yeah. So may I just address itong isa, yung remote learning resources. Okay, so yung I think yung remote learning resources, there are two forms of this, diba? So the first one is for the course pack preparation and the distribution. So the funds for this are being processed for transfer to the CUs. And the other form is the program resources. So just to give an update on that, all the submissions from the different CUs actually total 270 million. So we had to prioritize this, and in the prioritization, 110 million in total. So this is being recommended for funding and is on the agenda of the executive committee of the president, which will meet on Monday. Sir Ton?
So I think meron pong ganung question, ma'am, about yun nga yung the equipment and yung mga other skills and other infrastructure po. No? And I think yung ilan po doon, sinubukang sagutin doon sa OVPA na nakakalabas lang at yung nabanggit nila pa parang a lot of the things are in discussion, tama po ba? Or needs some approval po? No? Yeah. Okay. So I think parang the anxiety is really high because we're starting classes next week.
I know, I understand.
So, Ma'am Angie, thank you so much for taking the time and syempre po for listening and also for addressing a lot of the concerns po of our faculty this afternoon. And since we started this, and marami po siguro tayong maririnig po ng mga comments and suggestions as we proceed this semester. So thank you, ma'am. And
thank you. Salamat din, Ton. Thank you.
Yes po. Yes, ma'am. So siguro po before we close, baka po I don't know if there's anything else that Dean Vern or Prof. Judy or Ma'am Joyce would like to add, no, before we wrap this up po? Siguro po, maybe we can start with Prof. Judy.
Yeah, all I want to say, I mean, hi Banji, I totally agree about communication, but it seems like it's not happening. Our research-based position paper was submitted with the program review. So we should have foreseen the problem of no slots for students as early as July. Nothing was done. I mean, we pass everything we need through channels. We requested through OUR to resection. No, cannot be. Now I'm saying maybe we can consider 9 units as a load and not 12 because we have a problem with staffing these courses. But these are not suggestions I hear being talked about. Anyway, I just want to reiterate, I mean, I said many other things in my talk. Just want to reiterate that we're not without concrete suggestions. We're not getting feedback. That's all. Thank you.
I forgot to mention about the 9 units, no? So that was in the agenda of the AAC. So it's still for discussion. So that's why, so I couldn't say anything concrete about the 9 units loading, no? But it's being discussed.
Okay, it's great to know that it's being discussed because what we're seeing now is really a great mismatch in demand and supply. So please, thank you, Nachi. Thank you.
Yeah, I understand.
Thank you po. And Prof. Judy, thank you so much po for taking the time and for everything that you shared. And for sharing your position paper also with us. Thank you po. Si Dean Vern, Dean, is there anything else po that you'd like to add?
Yes, siguro ang isang pwedeng paraan para tulungan kami ng system, kagaya ng nabanggit ko kanina, ay tulungan kami na ma-relax yung rules on procurement, rules on disbursement, and so on. Kagaya ng sinabi ko, alam namin na may support ang darating sa system, pero bumabagal dahil nga dumadaan doon sa government procurement rules na yon. Kahit ito na yung pera, in-approve na, pwede nang bilhin, pero hindi muna. Kagaya nga nung sinabi ko kanina sa yung subscription for copyrighted material, kailangan pa dumaan sa isang certified agent ng PhilJeps. When it could have been a very easy transaction between UP and the provider. So ito yung mga sanang nakapagpadali ng mga bagay-bagay.
Sige, Dean Vern, tingnan natin kasi yan procurement talaga, diba, no? Talagang challenge. Medyo tali ang kamay natin pagdating sa procurement. As I understand it, the way that we can go around it is to do emergency procurement. Like, for example, diba yung priority subscriptions na na-identify, yung priority subscriptions ng library na na-identify, I know umaandar na yon. And ang ginawa nila doon is the priority subscription. And by the way, I also want to acknowledge also yung nabanggit ni Prof. Judy na performance databases, no? So yes, we should get those. So I will include that in the list of the databases that we'll ask the library to look into. Tas din, Vern, I remember meron din pong nagsabi before na parang yung yung sa mga musical what's this? Yung
scores.
Ano yun, sir?
Mga score.
Yes, sir. Yan, yung mga copyrighted musical scores. So we're also coordinating with the library for that.
Oo nga ho. We went we did that already, kaya lang pinahanap kami ng PhilJeps mediator. Ngayon parang umaayaw na yung provider dahil nagtataka siya bakit tayo ganun. So let me see what we can do to go back and padaanin sa library instead sa
Opo, sir. Sige, sir. Coordinate ko din po, sir, sa library para baka sakaling mapasama dun sa emergency procurement na ginagawa.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Ma'am Vanji. I don't know if there's anything else. Ma'am Joyce, is there anything else po that you'd like to add, or at least a quick message maybe to all the very anxious faculty who are going to do this for the very first time?
Ano lang po, siguro thank you na lang po for having me here. I hope na useful naman po yung presentation ko, and it actually makes me a little grateful that UPOU had a bit of a head start before the pandemic, no, that we've been doing this for a while now, so the adjustment was not difficult for us. And anyway, if anyone na lang po of the faculty needs very specific help that you think I could be able to help you with, you can probably reach out to me or UPOU. I don't want to commit completely, of course, pero if I could help, I would. And I'm really willing to share our methods if it really feel that could help you na lang po. Ganun na lang po siguro for now.
Thank you. Just very quickly po, ano po ulit yung inyong email address in case some of our faculty members would like to contact you?
It's joycemay.manalo@upou.edu.ph.
Okay, thank you so much for making time, Ma'am Joyce. I don't know po if there's anything else that you'd like to add, but again, maraming salamat po for being here this afternoon. In case po there's anything else that you'd like to say or add to this conversation, nag-post po kami sa chat box ng link to an evaluation form. It's bit.ly/RILC arts. Okay po. And then final reminders na lang po, tomorrow po will be our very last webinar. It's on how to be a lifeline, providing psychosocial support to our students during this time. It's from 9 to 10:30 in the morning. If you'd like to join us po, we hope to see you tomorrow morning. We had a lot of issues and challenges raised in this webinar. Some opportunities and some hopeful ideas and suggestions. And a lot of concrete ideas presented. So hopefully po, we can have, hindi naman po ito yung huling pagkakataon that we will be talking about this. So thank you po for joining us. And please feel free po to send us an email for other things po that you'd like to say and other forms of support that you need that maybe we can help you with during this time. Good afternoon po sa inyong lahat and good luck po with the opening of classes next week. See you po. Maraming salamat ulit sa ILC, kina Miss Melody, kay Lo, Grepo, kay Daisy at Joy from Office for the Advancement of Teaching. Ma'am Vanji, thank you ulit. Prof. Judy, Dean Vern, and Ma'am Joy. Thank you. Good afternoon po sa inyo lahat. I-end na po namin ito in 1 minute. The 5:15 po. Thank you po ulit for joining us. We took note po of all your questions. So thank you po for raising them. Okay po, we'll end this na. Good afternoon po. See you tomorrow.